I'm delighted to be talking today to Matthew Gale, Senior Curator at Large at Tate Modern in London, UK. Thank you so much for accepting our invitation. When thinking about Constantin Brâncuși, what are your first thoughts on his impact on modern art?
I mean, obviously, Brâncuși has become a crucial figure in the way in which 20th century sculpture has been developed and how it was written about in histories and how it's looked back upon from the current position. And his pivotal role comes in breaking with fixing upon the outer appearance of the body mainly through modeling in the tradition of Rodin, to something that moves towards what was perceived as being an abstraction, an idea that you could get to something at the heart of the essence of a being, rather than dealing with the superficial surface of the appearance of the person, the object, or the animal that he chose to work with. So that's an absolutely pivotal moment in thinking about how sculpture could develop, and it was in tune with many people who were working in Paris alongside him and elsewhere in the world.
You mentioned essence earlier, and you are the curator of the 2004 Tate Modern's Constantin Brâncuși, The Essence of Things exhibition. And similarly, in 2018 at Beaux-Arts in Brussels, they hosted the largest retrospective sublimation of form. How important was essence to Brâncuși? Why was it so important to him?
It's a good question. I think what he tries to fix upon is what's essential. And so, I mean, the reason why we called our exhibition The Essence of Things comes from a phrase that he used, in which he said, it's not about the exterior form, it's about the essence of things. So, but he was also claiming that his work was based in reality. So there are two things there. There's the idea that you can put away the superficial in order to get to something that's fundamental. But that doesn't mean that you're stepping away from reality. And he was quite critical of people who classed him as an abstract artist. And you see that in the fact that he maintains a foothold in the natural world, in the subjects that he chooses to build upon. So it's about refinement. It's about a reduction to get to something that's absolutely essential, and that is reflected in his working practices. As we know, he kept works in the studio over a long period. He would work in series so that he could develop things along the way. This was about a gradual reduction to get to something that was absolutely essential. And that's what makes him a great artist. But it also allows different eras to see his work in different ways and to respond to them through current conditions and urgencies. So I think that makes him timeless from that point of view.
Reflecting on Brâncuși's artwork, how would you describe the choice of materials and themes and the series that he created?
Well, those are two different things. I mean, his choice of materials is really interesting. He has certain subjects that are linked to certain themes in his work, so that the great wooden sculptures tend not to be part of long-running series, with the exception of the endless column. They tend to be sort of singular attempts at things. Obviously, casting in bronze allowed him to make a development through a series of works. But the thing that always surprised me is when one thinks of the birds that he made, a fantastic series of works. The fact that he attempted them in marble when it would have been so much easier to make them in wood, which for its tensile strength would have made it a much stronger form, seems to be a physical and technical challenge that he set himself. So there's that balance between the brilliant artist and the brilliant craftsman coming together in making those works that are not works that anyone else really could make.
I know that visitors are fortunate enough to see one of the polished bronze birds of Constantin Brâncuși at Tate Modern, Maestra, a second on his series. Could you please introduce us to his fascination for this theme and for the aspiration he had?
I mean, that's the theme of the bird, and you're right, it's fantastic that work is with us in Tate. It belonged to Brâncuși's friend, the photographer Edward Steichen. And so it's a work that has its own sort of interesting history of the relationships in Brâncuși's circle. He set it up in Steichen's garden on a tall column, and that speaks to that idea of the singing bird soaring into space, which becomes the theme that he develops over both the marble and bronze birds that get taller and thinner as he works on them through the 20s and 30s. This is all about trying to reduce form to its essence, but also having some sort of, as you say, a sort of the aspiration, a sense of rising, which is both with the song of the bird and to some degree optimistic, I think. It's also paradoxically the theme that led to the court case in America as to whether this was a decorative item or a work of art, which also brought considerable fame to Brâncuși because there was a challenge in court to define a work of art, something that is a repeated refrain in relation to modernism, where people are dismissive of new developments, and it comes slightly bizarrely to be decided legally in court cases.
Apart from being aspirational and ahead of its time, we know that Brâncuși was also a controversial artist through his work. Some of his pieces were really contested by the public and not really included in a category. How important it is for an artist to be controversial, and was it intentional for Brâncuși?
That's a good question. There's an element, I suppose, of self-promotion in being controversial. And I would doubt that was what he was interested in doing. He made the work that, in the case of the bird, for instance, that I just mentioned, he made it as part of a long series. So the fact that it went to a court in America to be determined whether it was a work of art or not was just one of his many works on which a stand was taken. That made him very famous. There were other works, but particularly Princess X, which was seen as being very sexual, very phallic. But that was also a development of earlier works. So I don't think he set out to be controversial. That having been said, he didn't step back from fighting that cause when people accused him of making either obscene works or works that were not proper works of art. So I think he was not shy of being controversial, but I don't think he set out to be controversial. It did make him the most famous modernist sculptor of his generation, as a sort of collateral advantage, as it were. And some were drawn to that and would commission works from him as a result. I mean, it's interesting that in 1938, he went to India to make works for the Maharaja of Indore, which were the birds that had been questioned as whether they were works of art or not a decade earlier. So there were some who were drawn to the controversy to support him.
We can say that Brâncuși was also an international traveler. He was this Romanian artist who worked in France. He was inspired by the folk art in his native country, but he also included the French contemporary influences, and he also had tribal influences in his artwork. How would you explain the way that Brâncuși managed to change his style according to his geographical position?
I suppose I'm not sure that I would say that he did change his style in relation to his geographical position. I think he is, like many of the greatest artists, he absorbed inspiration from things that he knew would help his work. So it can be quite random in some cases. There's a story of him nearly drowning while swimming in the Mediterranean, and there was a piece of wood that he clung on to, and that then became an element in his studio when he returned to work. So there are everything had its potential to inspire. He visited an industrial exhibition with Marcel Duchamp in 1912, and aeroplane parts inspired him. So there's all these things can be drawn together. I think you're right in saying that he's totally, an international artist, in that the result of that mixing of inspirations leads to an art that is that has resonances in many places, shall we say, as well as his tendency to be reductive allows him to get to something that is very concise and elegantly austere.
I'm happy that you brought this international character of his artwork into discussion. What else would you think defines the universality of Brâncuși? We can find his art pieces throughout the world in top museums. Everyone relates to Brâncuși, especially Romanian people. And we still haven't got yet another great artist to represent us. So how do you think a new star is born? How do you think we go to the next level?
Well, that's a difficult one. And that puts tremendous pressure on artists working today to live up to that reputation. I mean, he is reputed to have said that nothing grows under a great oak when referring to Rodin, and hence his break with Rodin's reputation and style. So maybe there is someone working now who needs to take that approach and to step out from under the weight of expectation surrounding Brâncuși. But I think art's not a competition, so it has to be something that develops naturally from the way in which artists are working. He's managed to inspire different ways of working. When you look at the interwar generation of sculptors who responded to Brâncuși's work, in contrast to the minimalists who responded to his work in the 1960s. They're making completely different sorts of things. So it's now for a new generation to be thinking, what can we take? What essence can we take from Brâncuși to develop our own?
We get back to the essence once more, and the Art Safari public is a really young one. So they mostly relate to great names of old masters from documentaries, from going to museums. They are yet really interested in art, and in 2018 we displayed one piece of Brâncuși, and they were totally into it. So his name survives the generations. Is there any new way or a specific story that you would like to tell young people today about this great Romanian artist?
I think understanding the struggle he went through in order to fulfill his ambition is, a universal story that, whatever one's circumstances and whatever the context. But what really is clear from his life's work is a complete dedication to it, to the exclusion of everything else, the exclusion of, personal relationships, the sense of whether he could have or recognize a family. He was totally dedicated to creating his art in a single-minded way. That requires a great force of character, and that isn't so common.
The best of luck, and thank you once more. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.